Before we dive in, I'd love to know, where are you watching from tonight? Drop your country or city in the comments. It always amazes me how far our pack stretches around the world. Now, let's begin. The pack house was already awake when Ember slipped into the shadows of the nursery. From the lower halls came the scent of roasted meats and the clamor of servants dragging crates of wine for the night's lunar mating ceremony. Laughter echoed from the upper corridors where the noble-born daughters paraded in silk robes, rehearsing their smiles in gilded mirrors. Ember didn't belong in either world. She knelt on the worn floorboards, tugging her frayed apron tighter around her waist. 3 tiny bodies stirred in the nest she had made from discarded blankets. The pups whimpered softly, their cries breaking through the grand celebration stirring below. No one else cared enough to hear. No one but her. Ash, the eldest of the 3, blinked open his small brown eyes and crawled toward her hand. Ember stroked the top of his head with a gentleness that made her heart ache. He was a fighter, already positioning himself as protector of his siblings, though he was barely bigger than a loaf of bread. Beside him lay Luna, her fragile body thin from fever. Ember brushed a damp cloth across the pup's forehead. "Shoo, little one," she whispered. "The moon hasn't forgotten you. Not while I'm here." Luna whimpered once, then nuzzled deeper into Ember's palm. Storm was last, as always. He simply stared at her with 2 old eyes, quiet as snowfall. Ember sometimes wondered what secrets a soul like his carried already. She checked their bottles, warming them against her chest before feeding them one by one. While others downstairs painted their lips crimson and powdered their cheeks, Ember measured ounces of milk and hummed lullabies in a voice hoarse from use. This was her world, forgotten pups and silence. It was all she had, and all she dared to keep. Because to the rest of the Silvermoon pack, Ember was nothing. The whispers followed her everywhere: traitor's daughter, cursed blood, waste of breath. Her parents had died with dishonor, accused of treason during the border wars. Their sentence had marked her forever. Even now, years later, the council let her live only because omegas could be useful. She scrubbed floors, polished boots, mended torn cloaks. She was permitted to exist as long as she never forgot her place. And she never forgot. The scars across her wrists, pale bands from chains that had once bound her during punishments, made sure of that. But when she looked at the pups, she remembered something else, that she was capable of love, even if no one returned it. Especially if no one returned it. She rocked Luna in her arms and let her thoughts wander to the night ahead. The lunar mating ceremony came only once every 5 years. Tonight, Alpha King Dante would choose his queen. Every she-wolf in the pack dreamed of it. Scarlet Moonfire, the beta's daughter, was certain the crown was hers. Victoria Shadowcrest, the gamma's niece, played the long game, weaving her schemes like spider silk. Others would line the ballroom too, gowns glittering, hearts pounding with ambition. No one thought of Ember. She wasn't invited, wasn't considered, wasn't even imagined in such company. The only gown she had ever worn was her mother's old dress, long since moth-eaten and hidden beneath the floorboards of her tiny servant's room. Ember sighed and pressed a kiss to Ash's ear. "It's just as well," she murmured. "I'd rather be here with you than anywhere else." The pups didn't know they were outcasts. To them, she was warmth and food, song and safety. Their tiny bodies curled against her like she was the center of their world. And in that moment, she believed it. A sound drifted from the hall. Ember froze. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, too heavy to belong to servants. She held her breath. Her arms tightened around the pups. For an instant, panic pressed sharp against her ribs. If she was caught here instead of downstairs at her chores, punishment would be swift. But the footsteps passed. Only silence remained. Ember exhaled, her shoulders trembling with the release. She didn't know that sometimes, in the stillness of night, another pair of footsteps lingered outside this very door. That a shadowed figure, Alpha King Dante himself, had stood listening to the sound of her lullabies, his wolf restless with something he couldn't name. She didn't know she had already been seen. Downstairs, the chandeliers were being polished to brilliance. Servants rehearsed the ceremonial bows. The pack whispered of power, alliances, and destiny. Upstairs, in the forgotten nursery, Ember cradled the only beings who loved her without condition. She pressed her cheek to Luna's fur and whispered, "As long as I'm here, you will never be alone." The bell tolled 3 times, summoning the household to prepare. Ember looked toward the door, dread rising like smoke. Soon, the halls would fill with silk and perfume, and she would vanish into the shadows once more. But the pups whimpered, and she stayed. Because if the world chose to ignore her, Ember would choose differently. She would matter to someone. And far below, in the grand ballroom, Alpha King Dante straightened his ceremonial jacket and prepared to face 100 eager suitors. His wolf shifted restlessly, refusing every scent but one it had already claimed in secret. The moon was watching. And soon, the world would change. By dawn, the pack house had become a hive. Servants scurried like ants, balancing trays of crystal goblets, hauling baskets of moon lilies, polishing silver until it gleamed. The lunar mating ceremony was only hours away, and every corner of Silvermoon territory hummed with expectation. Every corner except one. In the abandoned nursery, Ember sat cross-legged on the floor with the pup sprawled across her lap. She hummed softly, braiding a strip of cloth into a makeshift toy. Ash gnawed proudly on one end while Storm batted the dangling braid with sharp little paws. Luna, weaker than the others, pressed her tiny body against Ember's chest, soothed by the rhythm of her heartbeat. It should have been peaceful. But the noise from the lower halls was impossible to ignore. Scarlet Moonfire's laughter rang like a bell, commanding attention. Ember could hear it echoing through the marble corridors even from here. The Beta's daughter had been preparing for this night since childhood, fed on the belief that the Luna crown belonged to her by birthright. Victoria Shadowcrest, the Gamma's niece, wasn't as loud but far more dangerous. She whispered her way through servants and counselors alike, trading secrets as easily as most traded coin. Both women expected to leave the ceremony with the Alpha King's mark on their necks. Ember tried not to think about them. She traced a fingertip over Luna's fur instead, focusing on the steady rise and fall of her breath. Still, doubt pressed in. What would happen to the pups when the council finally noticed them? Would they be shipped to another pack like unwanted burdens? Or worse, left outside the borders to fend for themselves? Her chest tightened. Not if I can help it. A knock jolted her from her thoughts. The door swung wide without waiting for an answer. Scarlet filled the frame in a cascade of emerald silk. Of course, she sneered, eyes narrowing at the sight of Ember surrounded by the pups. If there's a corner of this house to sully, the traitor's daughter will find it. Ember straightened, instinctively shielding the little ones. They needed care. No one else. No one else wanted them, Scarlet cut in. Her lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. And for good reason. Pups without parents are like wolves without teeth. Worthless. Behind her drifted Victoria, all smoke-gray silk and sly eyes. She leaned lazily against the doorframe, fingers toying with a strand of hair. Careful, Scarlet. The Alpha King has been taking late walks near this hall. If he finds our little Omega cradling pups instead of scrubbing floors, who knows what stories he might invent. Scarlet stiffened, annoyance flashing in her perfect features. Don't be ridiculous. The king has better things to notice. Victoria's smile deepened. Does he? Ember kept her gaze on Luna, refusing to rise to their bait. Her silence only seemed to amuse Victoria further. With a shrug, the two women swept out, leaving perfume clinging in the air like smoke after fire. The pups whimpered. Ember stroked their backs until they settled. But her own heart still pounded. She hated how easily their words slid under her skin, how quickly old shame resurfaced. The bell tolled once, twice, 3 times. It was time. Downstairs, the ballroom glittered. Crystal chandeliers bathed the marble floor in light, and every unmated she-wolf sparkled in silk and jewels. Families watched from the balconies, eyes sharp with ambition. Tonight was not just about love, it was about politics, power, bloodlines. Then the Alpha King entered. Dante Blackthorn was 6 feet of dominance wrapped in tailored black. His presence stole the air from the room. Conversations died. Even the music faltered before finding its rhythm again. Silver eyes swept the hall, cool and unreadable. The first dance belonged to Scarlet. She glided forward in emerald glory, head high as if she already wore the Luna crown. Her movements were perfect, her smile rehearsed. Dante's hand closed over hers with the precision of duty, but his expression never changed. Victoria followed, spinning her web of charm with every turn. Others came after, one by one, each more desperate than the last. Yet no matter how polished, no spark lit his gaze. The pack began to whisper. Confusion rippled through the ballroom like a storm-tossed tide. At last, Dante raised a hand. The music stopped. "My people," his voice carried, low and commanding. "You brought me your daughters. You honored tradition. But the mate bond honors truth, and tonight, the truth is not here." Gasps scattered like broken glass. Mothers paled. Fathers stiffened. Scarlet's lips parted in horror, Victoria's smile froze. And then, before anyone could stop him, the Alpha King turned his back on them all and walked away from his own mating ceremony. Upstairs, Ember rocked the pups to sleep, unaware that destiny was climbing the staircase toward her. The nursery door creaked open, and Ember's breath caught. She was still kneeling on the floor, Ash curled against her knee, Storm batting at her apron string, and Luna asleep in the crook of her arm. For a heartbeat, she thought Scarlet had returned to mock her again. But it wasn't Scarlet. The man filling the doorway seemed too large for the narrow frame, his presence pressing into the room like thunder rolling over quiet fields. His ceremonial jacket hung open at the throat, the gleam of his silver eyes sharper than any blade. Alpha King Dante. Ember's pulse leapt. Instinct screamed at her to bow, to lower her gaze, to hide. Instead she clutched the pups tighter, heart hammering as if it could shield them. I can explain," she stammered, her voice trembling. They were feverish. The nursery was empty. "I'll leave at once." "Don't." Just one word, spoken low, but it halted her tongue. Dante stepped inside and closed the door softly behind him, sealing away the noise of the grand ballroom below. Then, to Ember's disbelief, he lowered himself to one knee, bringing his towering frame level with the pups. Shadow, his wolf, prowled beneath his skin, restless but calm in the presence of the little ones. Ash sniffed at him curiously, then toddled forward on unsteady legs to plant a paw on Dante's knee. Ember's mouth went dry. "Please," she whispered. "They've suffered enough. If you must punish someone, punish me." Dante's gaze rose to hers. For the first time, she saw no judgment, no disdain, only intensity, sharp and unyielding. "I haven't come to punish." Her heart stuttered. "Then, why?" He reached out one large, careful hand. Ash sniffed, then accepted the offered finger with a lick before collapsing in trust against Dante's palm. The sight nearly undid Ember. No one had ever treated these pups with such gentleness. "I've been watching you," Dante said at last. Ember blinked, stunned. "Watching, me?" "For months," he continued, his voice steady as steel. "Every night when I walk this hall, I hear your voice. I see the way you hold them as if they are the whole world. The pack calls you Omega, traitor's daughter. But my wolf, his jaw tightened. My wolf calls you mate. The words slammed into Ember like a blow. She shook her head, clutching Luna closer. No. That can't be. I'm nothing. You are everything, he cut in, the force of his tone making her flinch. Then his voice gentled, softening like fire banked to embers. Don't you feel it? She did. Against her will, she felt it, the electric pull under her skin, the way her pulse matched his, the way her breath caught whenever his eyes found hers. Her whole life, she'd believed she was broken, unwanted. And yet here he was, claiming something she couldn't deny. Her knees trembled. I don't understand. You don't need to, Dante murmured. The moon does. She led me here tonight, not to crowns and gowns, but to you. Tears stung Ember's eyes, though she fought them. I'm not worthy. The pack will never accept me. They will, Dante said, rising to his full height, ash still nestled in one hand like a precious treasure. Because I do. His voice deepened, carrying the weight of alpha command. You are mine, Ember. You always have been. And these pups, he looked down at them, his expression softening in a way that startled her, they are ours now. Her walls cracked. She had braced her whole life against cruelty, against coldness, against rejection. But she had never braced herself against kindness. Against being seen. The mate bond surged between them like lightning, sparking at every point their eyes held. Ember's body trembled with it, her soul reaching even as her mind screamed caution. No one will believe it, she whispered hoarsely. They don't need to believe, Dante replied. They need to obey. And then, before she could think, before she could remember to fear, the Alpha King lowered his head and pressed his lips gently to her forehead. It wasn't a kiss of hunger but of recognition, a seal of something eternal. The room seemed to shift, the air humming with unseen power. Ember's breath hitched, her heart soaring and breaking all at once. For the first time in her life, she felt like she wasn't invisible. But outside the nursery walls, chaos brewed. Word of Dante's rejection at the ceremony spread like wildfire. Scarlet's pride burned to fury. Victoria's schemes sharpened like blades. The council murmured, already plotting. And when they discovered where their king had gone, and with whom, Ember's fragile new world would be tested by fire. By morning, the packhouse felt different. The air was sharp, tense, as though the walls themselves had overheard the Alpha King's choice and could not stop whispering about it. Ember noticed at the instant she stepped from the nursery, Pups bundled in her arms. Servants who had once ignored her now stared openly, their whispers darting like knives. That Omega, one hissed. The Alpha King was seen near her quarters last night. Another sneered, she's bewitched him, must be using exile magic. Her throat tightened, but she kept walking, head lowered. The pup squirmed, sensing her unease. Scarlet Moonfire's voice cut through the corridor like a whip. There she is. Ember froze. Scarlet strode toward her, emerald gown exchanged for a crimson one that burned against her pale skin. Every step echoed with fury. Behind her came Victoria, composed as always, silk gray dress flowing like mist, her smile cold enough to freeze water. Scarlet's eyes raked over Ember with open contempt. You dare show your face after last night? Ember hugged the pups closer. I don't know what you mean. Oh, you know exactly what I mean. Scarlet's lip curled. The Alpha King leaves his ceremony unfinished, and where is he seen? Not among queens. Not with daughters of noble blood. No, he disappears into the servant's wing, into your wing. Her voice dripped venom. You must be very proud of yourself, traitor's daughter. Victoria stepped forward, gaze flicking to the pups with mockery. Look at her, clutching mongrels like their treasure. Do you think he'll crown you Luna because you can sing lullabies? Sweet, but pathetic. Ember's chest tightened. She wanted to vanish, to melt into the stone floor. But Luna whimpered softly in her arms, and that tiny sound gave her courage. She straightened her shoulders, voice trembling but clear. They needed care. No one else would. Scarlet's laughter was sharp as glass. And you think that makes you worthy of a king? She stepped closer, so close Ember could see the fury blazing in her eyes. Do you know what I prepared for last night? The gowns, the rituals, the blessings. Years of training, all wasted because he turned his back. Scarlet's breath shook. On me. Victoria's hand slid lightly along Scarlet's arm, her smile never faltering. Careful, Scar. Rage makes you sloppy. If the Alpha wants a pet Omega, let him tire of her. He always does. Her eyes gleamed as she turned them on Ember. Because that's all you are. Temporary. The word sliced deep, reopening every scar Ember carried. She had always known her place was fragile, that one misstep could send her back to the gutter where whispers wished her. But now, with the pups heavy in her arms and the memory of Dante's touch still burning against her skin, the cruelty stung differently. For the first time, Ember wanted to fight back. I never asked for his attention, she said, voice unsteady but rising. I only cared for those who needed me. If kindness makes me unworthy, then perhaps worth is a hollow thing. Scarlet's hand lashed out before Ember could move. Fingers closed around her wrist, digging into old scars. Ember gasped, clutching the pups tighter with her other arm. You dare speak to me like, Scarlet began, but the words cut off. A growl thundered through the corridor. Every head snapped toward the sound. Dante stood at the end of the hall, his silver eyes blazing, power rolling off him in waves so thick even the air seemed to bend. Shadow, his wolf, prowled beneath his skin, dangerous and near the surface. Scarlet's grip loosened instantly. She stumbled back, face paling. Victoria, ever composed, dipped into a shallow bow, though her smile twitched at the corners. Dante's voice was low, lethal. Touch her again, and you won't have a hand to adorn with rings. The corridor went silent. Servants flattened against walls, terrified to breathe. He crossed the space with long strides, stopping only when he stood before Ember. The pup stirred, and without hesitation, he reached to steady Luna's fragile head with a tenderness that silenced every whisper. Then he looked at Ember, not Scarlet, not Victoria, not the gathering crowd. Just her. His voice carried the weight of kings and the intimacy of a vow. You are mine, he said, loud enough for the entire hall to hear. From this day forward, no one will lay hand or word against you. Ember is my mate, chosen by the moon herself. She is your Luna. Gasps rippled like a storm through the pack house. Scarlet's face blanched, her fury twisting into disbelief. Victoria's mask cracked for just a second, envy flashing hot in her eyes. Ember's knees wavered. Her heart thundered with disbelief, fear, and something far more dangerous, hope. She wanted to protest, to deny, to say he was wrong. But when his hand brushed hers, the mate bond surged again, undeniable. Around them, the pack whispered, scandal and outrage spreading like fire. But Dante didn't flinch. He bent his head closer, his words meant for her alone. They can rage, he murmured. They can scheme. Let them. I will never let them touch what's mine. And for the first time in her life, Ember believed someone. The morning after Dante's declaration, the pack house buzzed with fury barely veiled as shock. Everywhere Ember walked, eyes followed her. Some burned with curiosity, others with open hatred. A few, very few, looked at her with cautious wonder, as though daring to hope that a king could truly love an Omega. Ember didn't feel like a Luna. She felt like prey. The council wasted no time. By sunrise, she was summoned to the Grand Hall, a space she had only ever glimpsed from the servants' gallery. Its vaulted ceiling soared like a cathedral, banners of the Silvermoon Pack hanging heavy in the air. Ember stood alone at the center, clutching her hands together to hide their trembling. Scarlet and Victoria sat near the front, gowns immaculate, eyes glinting with venomous satisfaction. They had failed to claim the Alpha, but they weren't finished. Ember knew it. An elder counselor rose. If the Alpha King insists this Omega is to be Luna, then she must be tested. Training in etiquette, diplomacy, and history. She must prove she can stand where the moon goddess places her. Whispers surged through the hall. She'll never manage it. She can't even read the old tongue. This will destroy her. Dante's voice cut through the noise, cool and commanding. She will succeed. I'll see to it myself. But Ember knew the test wasn't for him. It was for her. And every rival in the room wanted her to fail. The training began the next day. Her mornings were consumed with endless lessons. Court etiquette, how to bow without looking weak, how to walk as though silk and shadow trailed in her wake. Diplomacy, phrases layered with double meanings, polite lies passed like poisoned wine. History, scrolls in the old tongue, symbols she had never been taught to read. Ember stumbled through it all, her cheeks burning as tutors sighed in frustration. Scarlet appeared often, always with cutting words disguised as sweetness. Poor dear, she would purr. Even a pup learns faster. Victoria, subtler, watched silently, eyes sharp as blades, waiting for cracks. But Ember had the pups. Each afternoon, when lessons ended, she fled back to the nursery. Ash bounded to her first, brave and stubborn, tugging her sleeve until she laughed despite the ache in her chest. Luna curled against her, a living reminder of gentleness. Storm sat at her feet, wise eyes patient, as though reminding her to breathe. It was in those quiet hours that she found her strength again. Dante never hovered, but Ember often felt his presence. A glance across the training yard, a shadow in the doorway during lessons, a hand steadying her elbow when exhaustion threatened to drag her down. His faith was steady, unyielding, even when hers faltered. One evening, after a particularly cruel session in which Scarlet, accidentally, spilled ink across Ember's painstakingly copied scrolls, Ember found him waiting by the nursery door. "You're tired," he said simply. She wanted to deny it, but her voice cracked. "I don't belong here." Dante stepped closer, his silver eyes holding hers. "You belong more than any of them. Do you think I chose you out of pity? My wolf would never allow it. He saw what I see, your strength is not in titles or bloodlines. It's in this." He gestured toward the pups asleep in their nest. "The way you love without condition. That is what this pack needs in a Luna." Ember's throat tightened. No one had ever spoken to her like that. No one had ever believed she could be more than the shame of her parents' sins. She didn't answer, but when Dante's hand brushed hers, she didn't pull away. Her trials didn't end, but slowly, Ember began to change. She learned to keep her chin lifted when rivals sneered. She studied by moonlight, tracing strange symbols until her eyes burned. She learned that diplomacy wasn't about lying, but about holding your ground with grace. And when jealousy struck hardest, when Scarlet whispered that the pups were a weakness, or when Victoria hinted that Omegas were disposable, Ember held tighter to the bond forming between herself and the Alpha King. She was still terrified. But terror, she realized, didn't mean she was powerless. It meant she had something worth fighting for. And as the moon rose higher each night, the bond that tethered her to Dante grew stronger, thrumming under her skin, promising that she was not alone. For the first time in her life, Ember dared to believe she might survive this trial. But survival was not what her enemies planned for her. The council chamber smelled of parchment and polished wood, but beneath the surface it reeked of something sharper, judgment. Ember stood in the center, the weight of 100 stairs pressing down on her. The long table stretched in a crescent before her, elders in dark robes whispering among themselves. Scarlet and Victoria lounged in the gallery, their expressions sharpened into satisfaction. "An omega as Luna," one elder scoffed, his voice heavy with disdain. "It's unheard of." "Unacceptable," another agreed. The Alpha King insults centuries of tradition with this choice. Their words stung, but Ember kept her chin lifted. She'd spent too long lowering her gaze. Tonight she would not. Dante stood behind her, tall and silent, his presence like a wall of iron. He hadn't spoken yet, letting the council reveal their venom. Shadow stirred beneath his skin, impatient, but Dante's control was absolute. Scarlet rose gracefully, voice dripping honey. "No one doubts the Alpha King's power. But surely, he deserves a Luna worthy of his throne. One trained since birth for leadership." Her gaze slid to Ember like a blade. "Not a charity case." A murmur rippled through the chamber. Ember's heart hammered. Every instinct told her to shrink, to disappear. But then she thought of the pups, Ash's fierce loyalty, Luna's fragile warmth, Storm's quiet wisdom. They needed her to be strong. Dante needed her to stand, not cower. So she stepped forward. "I never asked to be chosen," Ember said, her voice trembling but clear. "I never expected the Alpha King to see me. But when the pack abandoned 3 helpless pups, I stayed. Not for glory. Not for power. For love. If that makes me unworthy, then perhaps your definition of worth is broken." The room erupted in whispers. Some scoffed, some frowned, but a few, just a few, looked thoughtful. Victoria stood next, smooth as silk. "Touching," she purred. "But sentiment does not lead packs. Discipline does. Intelligence. Bloodline. What happens when neighboring alphas see our king mated to a traitor's daughter? They will smell weakness. They will come for us." Ember's breath caught. She had no answer for that. The truth of her bloodline was a wound that never healed. The shame of her parents' betrayal clung like smoke, choking her. Dante stepped forward at last. His voice silenced the chamber instantly. "You speak of weakness," he said, silver eyes cutting through them all. "But tell me, where were you when those pups cried in the night? Where was your discipline? Your noble blood?" It was Ember who soothed them. Ember who gave love when you offered none. His gaze hardened. "If love is weakness, then I will build an empire on it." Scarlet's face burned crimson, fury twisting her features. Victoria's smile faltered, a hairline crack in her perfect mask. An elder cleared his throat. "Alpha, you risk rebellion. The council cannot condone." "Enough." Dante's voice cracked like a whip. Shadow surged, filling the chamber with the weight of his dominance. Every wolf present felt it, shoulders bowing, throats tightening under the force of his will. The moon goddess chose. "I obey. Question her wisdom, and you question me." Silence. No one dared. Dante turned, his gaze softening only when it found Ember. He reached for her hand, lifting it so every eye saw. "She is my mate. My Luna. Those who cannot accept it may leave my pack before the sun sets." The words rang like steel on stone, final and unbreakable. Scarlet gasped, outrage choking her. "You can't." "I can," Dante said, his eyes never leaving Ember's. "And I have." Ember's heart pounded so fiercely she thought she might faint. The chamber spun with whispers, curses, disbelief. Yet Dante's grip anchored her, steady and sure. She searched his face, expecting to see doubt, regret, calculation. But she found only conviction. And something else. something that made her chest ache. Pride. For the first time in her life, someone was proud of her simply for being herself. Scarlet stormed from the gallery, silk whipping in her wake. Victoria lingered a moment longer, her smile returning like a mask sliding back into place. She inclined her head, mocking. "Very well, Your Majesty. If the moon has spoken, who are we to argue?" But her eyes glittered with promise. This was not the end of her games. When the chamber finally emptied, Ember swayed, exhaustion crashing over her. Dante caught her instantly, pulling her against him. "You stood," he murmured against her hair. "You didn't break." "I nearly did," she whispered back. "But you didn't. That is what matters." She closed her eyes, clinging to the warmth of him, to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. The trial was not over. Scarlet's fury and Victoria's schemes would only grow. But for this moment, in the echoing chamber where the pack had tried to tear her down, Ember had not fallen. And Dante had sworn before them all that she never would. The days following Dante's declaration blurred into a haze of tense smiles and sharpened whispers. Ember walked the halls with the pups in her arms, every step dogged by eyes that judged, scorned, or seethed. The air itself felt heavier, thick with jealousy and resentment. Scarlet kept her distance, but her absence was louder than her voice. She no longer mocked Ember openly, she plotted. And where Scarlet burned, Victoria moved like smoke, slipping into corners, speaking softly to counselors, weaving webs unseen. Ember tried to ignore it. She threw herself into training, into caring for the pups, into learning what it meant to stand beside a king. But unease clung to her like a second skin. Storm, the quietest of the pups, seemed to sense it too. He would lift his head suddenly, ears pricked, gaze following shadows Ember couldn't see. One evening, the warning came. She had just finished feeding Luna when the lanterns flickered. A faint creak echoed outside the nursery door. Ember froze. It wasn't Dante, his steps were heavier, more certain. These were softer, hesitant, like men trying not to be heard. The latch turned. Two figures slipped inside, their faces hidden beneath hoods. Ember's blood turned cold. She backed against the wall, pups clutched tight. "Who are you?" The first man smirked. "No one you'll live to remember." The second lunged. Ember twisted away, shielding the pups with her body. Her shoulder slammed into the wall, pain lancing through her. Ash yelped in fright. "Take her," the first hissed. "The council doesn't want her dead, not yet. Just gone." Panic surged through Ember's veins. This wasn't a random attack. This was orchestrated. The council, or perhaps Scarlet and Victoria, had finally moved their pieces. The second man grabbed her arm, wrenching it painfully. Ember cried out, but then something inside her snapped. A lifetime of being prey, of bowing and shrinking, boiled over. "No," she hissed. She swung her elbow hard, catching him across the jaw. He stumbled back, startled by her strength. Ember clutched the pups tighter, her breath ragged. Fear still gripped her, but beneath it burned something fiercer, defiance. The first man sneered. "You'll regret that." The door slammed open. Dante filled the frame like a storm breaking, silver eyes blazing with lethal fire. A growl tore from his chest, primal and terrifying. Shadows surged beneath his skin, and the intruders froze, caught in the weight of an alpha's wrath. "Put them down," Dante snarled, each word vibrating with the promise of violence. The second man dropped Ember's arm instantly. The first tried to retreat, but Dante was already moving. He crossed the room in a blur, his hand clamping around the man's throat. The intruder choked, feet kicking helplessly as Dante lifted him effortlessly off the floor. "You dare touch what's mine?" Dante's voice was low, deadly. "You dare come for my mate in my own house?" The man gurgled, eyes bulging. Dante's grip tightened. Shadow howled, hungry for blood. Dante. Ember's voice cracked through the haze. She clutched the pups, her eyes wide, terrified, not of the men, but of him. For a heartbeat, the beast wanted to finish it. To snap the intruder's neck and let his body fall as warning. But the fear in Ember's eyes cut deeper than any blade. With a growl of restraint, Dante hurled the man to the floor instead. Take them to the dungeons, he ordered the guards who had rushed in behind him. I'll deal with them after dawn. The intruders were dragged away, broken and gasping. Silence fell, heavy as stone. Dante turned, his chest still heaving with fury. His gaze landed on Ember, and the fire in his eyes softened, though it didn't disappear. He stepped forward, his hand trembling as he reached to touch her arm. Did they hurt you? Ember shook her head, though her arm throbbed. I'm fine. His eyes darkened at the lie. You are not fine. You were attacked under my roof. Because of me. Her throat tightened. Because of me. No, his voice was fierce. Because they fear you. Because they know what you are becoming. Ember's lips parted, stunned. What I'm becoming? He brushed his thumb gently across the curve of her wrist, over the old scars. Not prey. Not an outcast. A Luna who will break them all if they're foolish enough to test her. Tears stung her eyes, unbidden. She hated them, hated showing weakness, but Dante didn't flinch. He cupped her cheek, silver eyes burning with a vow. They will never touch you again. I'll hunt down every traitor in this pack if I must. Ember's voice was hoarse. You can't protect me from everything. His lips curved into something between a smile and a snarl. Watch me. The pups whimpered, sensing the tension. Ember pulled them close, kissing their tiny heads, her body trembling with the aftermath of fear. Dante's hand stayed at her back, steady, unyielding. Outside, whispers already spread through the corridors. The Alpha King had nearly killed 2 intruders with his bare hands. The Luna-to-be had fought back like a wolf before ever shifting. Scarlet seethed in her chambers, her carefully laid plans unraveling. Victoria's smile never slipped, but her mind raced. If brute force wouldn't break Ember, perhaps subtler poisons would. And Ember, standing in the wreckage of the nursery with her pups safe in her arms and Dante's hand on her back, knew only one thing for certain: the war for her place in this pack had only just begun. The nursery still smelled faintly of fear. Ember sat curled on the edge of her bed, the pups nestled close, their tiny breaths rising and falling against her chest. Shadows clung to the corners, whispering of what had nearly been taken from her. She hadn't slept since the attack. Every creak of the floorboards sent her heart racing, every gust of wind against the shutters made her clutch the pups tighter. The door opened softly. Dante stepped inside, carrying the weight of exhaustion in his broad shoulders. He'd spent the night interrogating the intruders, his hands still marked with faint smudges of blood. Yet when his gaze fell on her, the Alpha King seemed to falter, as though her fear wounded him more deeply than any enemy blade. Ember, he said gently, kneeling beside the bed. They're gone. You're safe now. Her throat tightened. Safe? You saw their faces, Dante. They were ours. Wolves sworn to you. His jaw clenched. Traitors. Bought with promises and poisoned by envy. They'll never see daylight again. She shook her head, eyes burning. And what about the next ones? And the ones after that? How many more until the whole pack turns on me? Dante's hand lifted, hesitating for the briefest moment before cupping her cheek. Then let them turn. Let them bare their teeth and show me their disloyalty. I will break every one of them before I allow a single claw to touch you. His words rang with iron, but Ember's chest still ached. She lowered her gaze, whispering, "You can't fight the whole world for me. I don't have to." His thumb brushed the hollow of her cheek, steady and sure. "Because you are not weak, Ember. You proved that last night. You fought back. You protected them." His eyes flicked to the pups nestled against her. "That is what a Luna does. Not jewels or gowns or titles. A Luna protects her pack with love fierce enough to shame cowards." Something cracked inside her then. The wall she had built from years of whispers, traitor's daughter, Omega trash, unwanted, splintered under the weight of his conviction. She wanted to believe him. Needed to. But believing meant letting go of every scar that had kept her alive. Dante seemed to sense her turmoil. His hand slipped from her cheek to her wrist, tracing the faint white lines there. "These scars tell me your story. But they do not define you." "I do." Her breath caught. "You?" His voice dropped, rough as gravel. "Your mate. The one the moon gave you. I've tried to wait, tried to give you time, but last night proved it, I can't. Not anymore." He leaned closer, the raw honesty in his silver eyes stealing her breath. "You are mine, Ember. And it's time the pack saw it." Her pulse thundered. "If you claim me, there's no going back." "There was never going back," he murmured. Before she could answer, he kissed her. It wasn't the hungry dominance she had feared. It was slow, reverent, yet fierce enough to shake her bones. His lips carried the weight of promises unspoken, of a bond forged in fire and shadow. Ember melted into him, her free hand tangling in his hair, the pup stirring between them but settling quickly, soothed by the strength that surrounded them. When he finally pulled back, his forehead rested against hers, breath mingling with hers in the fragile silence. "Tomorrow, before the entire pack, I will claim you. Not as charity. Not as scandal. But as my Luna. My equal. My forever." Tears blurred her vision. Fear whispered that the council would riot, that Scarlet and Victoria would strike again, that the pack would never accept her. But louder than fear was the steady rhythm of Dante's heartbeat against her chest. She whispered, almost to herself, "And what if I'm not enough?" He lifted her chin, forcing her to meet his gaze. "You are already more than enough. You are everything." The words unraveled her. With a trembling breath, she let herself believe, for one night, that she could be more than the shadows of her past. That she could be Luna. That she could be his. Dante pulled her fully into his arms, careful of the pups between them. His kiss deepened, a brand of possession and devotion, sealing what had always been written in the stars. The mate bond snapped taut, a current that surged through both of them, stronger now than ever. She gasped at the sensation, at the way her soul seemed to fuse with his, and he growled softly, as if the sound alone could anchor them. They broke apart only when the pups whimpered, Ember laughing shakily through her tears. Dante brushed the hair from her face, smiling faintly for the first time in days. "Rest," he told her, his tone softer now. "Tomorrow, the world can watch us burn it all down. But tonight, let it be just us." Ember closed her eyes, letting herself lean against him, his warmth wrapping around her like armor. For the first time since the night of the ceremony, she slept, not in fear, but in peace, cradled in the arms of the Alpha King who had vowed to claim her before the world. Outside, the pack whispered of scandal, betrayal, and rebellion. But inside that quiet room, destiny was already decided. The great hall buzzed with confusion, the air heavy with perfume, tension, and crushed pride. Every eye followed Dante as he strode through the crowd, his towering frame commanding silence without a single word. The chandeliers above flickered as though the moon goddess herself leaned closer to watch. The ceremony was meant to crown a Luna, but instead, it had become a battlefield of whispers. Scarlet stood frozen, her lips parted in shock, while Victoria's painted smile tightened like a mask ready to crack. Dozens of she-wolves fidgeted, their gowns rustling as their hopes collapsed like glass shattering on marble. But Dante didn't look at them, he had eyes only for her. Ember stood at the back of the room, half hidden in the shadow of the pillars, clutching the hem of her plain dress as though it were armor. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, panic clashing with the strange, magnetic pull that bound her to him. She had come only to check on the pups before slipping back into obscurity. She hadn't expected to be dragged into the spotlight by the most feared man in the realm. "Come here," Dante's voice rang out, deep and commanding, echoing across the marble hall. Gasps rippled through the pack like waves. An Omega? He was summoning an Omega during the lunar ceremony? Ember's legs trembled, refusing to obey. She shook her head slightly, hoping he would turn away, that he was only toying with her. But then his gaze locked onto hers, those silver-shot golden eyes burning through her fear, steady, unyielding. When her feet still refused to move, Dante did something no Alpha King had ever done. He descended from the dais, leaving the throne unclaimed, walking past every stunned noble and she-wolf until he stood before her. The room fell into absolute silence. Ember's heart hammered so violently she thought it might break her ribs. He smelled of pine and storm, intoxicating, overwhelming, and yet his closeness frightened her more than the scorn of 100 wolves. She whispered, "You shouldn't," but the words withered on her tongue when his hand cupped her chin, tilting her face toward his. "Look at me, Ember," he said softly, so only she could hear. His thumb brushed her jaw, and warmth flooded through her veins, the mate bond surging to life like fire licking at dry wood. The bond had been tugging at her since that night in the nursery, but now it snapped taut, undeniable. Around them, the whispers sharpened like knives. "She's the traitor's daughter. Unworthy. An Omega as Luna? The goddess must be mocking us." Scarlet's voice sliced through the murmurs. "Alpha, this is madness. She's beneath you." Victoria stepped forward too, her smile laced with venom. "You insult the council by even standing near her. Choose wisely, my king. A pack cannot follow weakness." Dante turned slowly, his expression a mask of cold fury. "Weakness?" His voice cracked like thunder. He reached back, pulling Ember gently into the circle of his arm, pressing her trembling body against his chest. "This woman has more strength than any of you. While you painted your lips and fought over gowns, she was the only one who gave her knights to feed and protect the blood of our fallen. She is not weakness. She is everything this pack has forgotten to honor." His declaration rang through the hall, silencing even the boldest whispers. Ember buried her face against his chest, half from shame, half from the strange safety she felt there. His hands spread across her back, steady and grounding, and for the first time in her life she felt wanted. But the pack was not convinced. A low murmur swelled again, disbelief, outrage, and fear mixing like smoke. Dante's wolf growled from within him, the sound vibrating against Ember's bones. He could feel their rejection, their disbelief pressing against her fragile frame like a storm trying to swallow her whole. He would not allow it. Lifting his head, Dante let his eyes glow gold, the power of his wolf shining through. "I am your king," he roared. "And she is my mate. My Luna. Chosen not by politics, nor by ambition, but by the moon goddess herself. Any who deny her deny me. Any who challenge her challenge me." The air itself seemed to bow under the weight of his command. Several wolves instinctively lowered their gazes, necks bared in submission. Even Scarlet flinched, though rage twisted her perfect features. Victoria's mask cracked, envy gleaming through her controlled facade. Ember shivered against him, not from fear but from the overwhelming tide of the bond. She whispered, so faint he barely caught it, "Why me?" His chest tightened at the fragility in her voice. Bending his head until his lips brushed her temple, he answered, because you are the only one who ever saw life as sacred, even when no one was watching. My wolf chose you long before I did. And now, he kissed her forehead, a soft claiming that sent sparks rushing through her veins. I will never let you go. A hush fell over the hall. For one suspended moment, even the most skeptical wolves couldn't deny what they had just witnessed, the unmistakable pull of a true mate bond, a force no counsel, no ambition, no rival could erase. Dante pulled back slightly, gazing down at Ember as though she were the only person in existence. Stand tall, Ember, he murmured, his voice meant for her alone. They will hate you, envy you, test you. But I will stand beside you through it all. You are mine, and I am yours. Her knees nearly gave out, but his strength held her upright. In that moment, the shame of her past and the weight of the whispers seemed lighter. For the first time, she wasn't just the traitor's daughter, or the forgotten Omega in the nursery. She was something more, something powerful, not because of herself alone, but because he had chosen her, and the goddess had bound them. Scarlet's shrill voice tried one last desperate plea. This is wrong. She'll never survive as Luna. She'll break, and when she does, the whole pack will suffer. Dante's lips curled in a dangerous smile. Then pray she never breaks. Because if she does, it will be this pack that suffers for ever daring to scorn its true queen. The hall erupted, not in cheers, not yet, but in a stunned silence that carried more weight than applause. Ember clung to him, her heart pounding, while Dante tightened his arm around her like a vow forged in fire. The Alpha King had made his move. The pack could rage, whisper, or plot in shadows, but the truth was etched into the night. Ember was his. Forever. Night came down like velvet, quiet and expectant after the storm of the Great Hall. The estate lay hushed beneath the moon's silver gaze, lanterns guttering along the walkways, banners whispering in the cool wind. In the nursery, Ember stood before the small mirror she'd polished herself, fingers shaking just enough to make the reflection blur. You don't have to be perfect, she told the woman in the glass. You only have to be true. Ash butted her ankle with a soft, bossy huff, as if seconding the thought. Luna snored delicately in the nest of blankets, tiny paws twitching. Storm sat watching the door, solemn and steady, a sentinel in miniature. A soft knock. The door opened, and Dante filled the frame, no crown, no cloak of ceremony, just a man whose shoulders carried a kingdom and whose eyes had already chosen their queen. The sight of him steadied her pulse and set it racing all at once. They're ready, he said, voice low, threaded with something fierce and tender. If you are. I'm terrified, Ember admitted. He came to her without hesitation, hands finding her shoulders, thumbs sweeping across her collarbones in a touch that anchored rather than possessed. Be terrified, he murmured. Be anything you need to be. And be mine. She nodded, and the fear loosened its teeth. They carried the pups together down the moonlit corridor, Ash in Dante's arm, trying very hard to look important, Storm in Ember's, regal with his quiet, Luna asleep against Dante's chest, a small sighing star. Servants stepped back, bowing without being told. Even the stones seemed to listen. The sacred grove opened like an open palm, an ancient ring of standing stones, laced with pale moss, bathed in silver light. Warriors ringed the outer circle, elders stood within, their faces stern but less certain than before. The great hall's scorn had followed them here, but it had lost its voice in the presence of the moon. Scarlet was there, jaw tight, emeralds burning at her ears like angry meteors. Victoria stood a step behind, her smile repaired, her eyes calculating. The council formed a dark crescent opposite the Alpha King. Dante moved to the heart of the stones and turned, offering Ember his hand. Not command. Invitation. Her breath hitched. She took it. A murmur ran through the gathered wolves, shock, disapproval, curiosity. The Alpha King laced their fingers, and the sound faded as though pulled away by the wind. He looked at her, not at the crowd. Ember of Silvermoon, he said, his voice filling the grove without effort. Daughter of pain, keeper of the lost, singer of small souls. The moon brought me to you not in a hall of crystal, but in a room of silence. She showed me that a crown without a heart is ash. Be my heart. Tears burned her eyes so quickly she had to close them. When she opened them, the elders were a blur beyond him, the whole pack reduced to a soft ring of breath and expectation. All she could truly see was Dante, the impossible safety of him, the danger of him, the truth of him. I don't have a noble name, she said, voice shaking, or a mother's dress fit for a queen. I don't know all your laws and I still stumble over your old tongue. But I know how to hold what others drop. I know how to stand when it would be easier to kneel. And I know how to love even when it doesn't love me back. She swallowed, lifted her chin. Choose me, and you will never stand alone, not as a king, not as a man. The moon poured silver onto them as if blessing every word. An elder stepped forward, ritual blade in hand, the kind carried through generations to seal bonds and oaths. He hesitated, studying Ember's face, as if searching for weakness and finding only light made from scars. According to tradition, the elder intoned, the Alpha's Luna binds with blood and vow before the pack and the moon. He looked to Dante. Do you bind? Until my last breath, and beyond it if the moon allows. Dante took Ember's hand, turned her palm gently upward, and nicked the soft skin with the smallest slice. He did the same to his own. Warmth welled, he brought their hands together. Heat met heat. The mate bond surged like a river breaking winter. The elder looked to Ember. Do you bind? Her voice was barely a whisper, but it traveled as if carried in a wolf's howl. Until my last breath, and beyond it. The moment their blood mingled, power lifted the hairs along every arm in the grove. Ember felt it race through her, shock, heat, recognition, and beneath it, deeper than breath, something inside her stirred. Not a full shift, not yet. But her senses sharpened as if a door had opened in her bones. The moss smelled like rain held in stone. The elders' hearts beat irregularly with age. Ash's bravado hid worry. Storm's calm sat like a lake. Luna dreamed of milk and warmth and a lullaby. Shadow rose in Dante's eyes, brilliant, feral, reverent. He lowered his head and pressed his mouth to Ember's cut, sealing it with a kiss that felt like a vow spoken in a language older than words. She did the same, breath trembling, and the grove answered them, a low, involuntary chorus of wolves, moved in spite of themselves. Luna, someone whispered, and this time it didn't sound like an insult or a dare. It sounded like a name finally finding its body. Scarlet made a sound that might have been a laugh if it weren't edged with desperation. Pretty theater, she said too brightly, the edges of her composure fraying. Let's see her carry a season of councils, a year of border raids, a winter without game. Enough, Dante said without turning. Not sharp. Final. Victoria's smile tilted. The pack will, of course, wish to see their Luna lead. They will, Ember said before fear could stop her. She stepped out of Dante's shadow, not away from him, never that, but into her own place beside him. And they will see me begin tonight. She looked for the smallest of hands and found them. Ash had wriggled himself free to sit at her foot, a stubborn speck of courage. Ember bent, scooping him up, then lifted her gaze to the circle. These are not symbols, she said, and her voice found a calm she had never owned in public. They are our future. When we turn from the smallest because they are debt rather than glory, we become animals that wear crowns and forget why we deserve them. I won't allow it. I will build a nursery wing with the same pride we build a war hall. We will train a corps of pup guardians from our strongest warriors. We will count kindness as discipline, not weakness. We will be a pack worth being born into. It shouldn't have landed. Not with elders who clutched tradition like prayer beads. Not with rivals who had sharpened themselves into weapons meant for thrones. But truth, when spoken without apology, has a way of changing a room. Heads bowed, not to power, but to sense. The elder with the ritual blade cleared his throat once, oddly gruff. So witnessed, he said, more to himself than to them. Then louder, so bound. Dante turned to the ring of wolves. Kneel, he said, but gently, as if offering a chance to lay burdens down. Kneel to your Luna. Knees struck earth like rain. Not all, never all. A handful remained standing, their silence a quiet promise of trouble to come. But most bowed, and in the hush that followed, a pup yawned loudly enough to make warriors smile despite themselves. Ember swayed, not from weakness but from the overwhelming lift of it, acceptance, incomplete but real, the mate bond, singing through muscle and marrow, Dante's hand at the small of her back, steady as gravity. She looked up at him. Is this real? She whispered. Or am I still in the nursery dreaming over empty bottles? Real, he said, and the words settled where nothing else ever had. And if it isn't enough, I will spend the rest of my life making it so. He kissed her then, not with the heat of claim, though heat rose like tide, but with the kind of steadiness a kingdom can stand on. The grove breathed with them, the moon poured light as if it had been waiting centuries to see this exact arrangement of two souls. A howl rose, one voice at first, then dozens. Dante tipped his head and answered, and Ember, without thinking, let sound pour from her throat. It wasn't a full wolf's cry, her shift lay ahead, promised rather than present, but it braided with his in a harmony that made even the doubters pause. When the howl fell back into quiet, Dante said, there is one more right. He lifted his gaze to the elders. By royal decree, the orphans Ash, Luna, and Storm are named kin of the Alpha House, wards of the crown, under the protection of the Luna. Any who threaten them threaten me. A murmur, softer, kinder. Someone in the warrior's ring thumped a fist against his chest in approval. Another followed. It grew like a heartbeat finding strength. Scarlet's lips trembled, pride fighting tears and losing the battle. Victoria masked her calculation beneath a pleasant tilt of the head. A bold night, she said lightly, for a young reign. For an old truth, Dante corrected, and the corner of his mouth lifted. We simply remembered it. He turned back to Ember, and the world shrank again to fit the two of them and 3 small lives between. What does my Luna want? He asked softly, on her first night crowned. Ember looked down at the pups, Ash trying not to fall asleep, Storm pretending not to smirk, Luna content as a small moon. She looked up at the ring of faces, some wary, some warmed, many undecided. Then she looked at the man who had taken a kingdom's fury to put gentleness back on its throne. Tonight, she said, a smile finding her without asking permission. I want us to go home. Feed them. Sleep. Begin again in the morning as if this was always how it was meant to be. Dante's laugh was quiet and incredulous, like a man spared at the last moment and not yet certain he deserved it. As the Luna commands. They left the stones together, hand in hand, the path lantern-lit and easy in a way it had never been for Ember. Wolves parted. Some bowed. A few did not, but their resistance felt smaller than her courage for the first time. Back in the nursery, they settled the pups. Ash gave up and collapsed, a brave boy allowed to be a child. Storm tucked his nose under his tail, satisfied. Luna dreamed, a ribbon of contentment in fur. Dante drew Ember into the circle of his arms. No titles. No watching eyes. Just breath and heartbeat and a future uncoiling like dawn. You were never invisible, he said into her hair. I know, she breathed, and felt the truth as surely as the bond humming in her bones. Not anymore. Outside, the moon sailed on, and the pack slept or schemed or slowly changed. Inside, 2 souls, bruised, bound, and chosen, kept their first quiet watch over what they had made together. A home strong enough to hold a realm. And in the hush before sleep, a promise settled between them like a second skin. Whatever came next, whispers, winters, wars, they would meet it as one. Alpha and Luna. King and Heart. The girl who sang to orphans and the wolf who heard her. The kingdom had a queen. The pups had a family. The night, at last, had a peace it trusted.